Section 2, Victimization and Questioning by the Police. This section dives into one of the most harrowing experiences of my life, not only surviving a violent assault in my own home, but also the devastating aftermath of being disbelieved by the very people sworn to protect me. Here, I recount the assault by Anna, a sudden, unprovoked attack while I was simply minding my own business, and the surreal nightmare that followed when I found myself treated as a suspect rather than a victim. That night, instead of feeling reassured by the presence of law enforcement, I faced an interrogation that felt more accusatory than investigative. It was a disorienting experience, one I could barely process as it unfolded. In my naivety, I assumed the detectives were simply gathering information to understand what had happened. I believed they would approach the situation logically, with an open mind. Instead, I quickly learned how skewed their perspective could be. Adding to my confusion and frustration, there were witnesses, people who saw Anna enter my home and leave just moments later, unscathed. They weren't in the room when she locked the door behind her, but they saw enough to corroborate my account. Still, their testimony did little to alter the course of events that night. Chapter 8, Victimization, Part 1. This is a deeply traumatic and disturbing story, one that is both painful to relive and challenging to put into words. As I write, I imagine you, dear reader, sitting beside me, offering quiet support as I share this chapter of my life. What you're about to read marks the beginning of the most terrifying, unexpected, and surreal events I have ever faced. Losing Lynn rivals the pain of these events, but it was not beyond my imagination of things that can happen in life. Lynn had been born with a genetic and terminal disease, and therefore, while it still surprised me how suddenly things took a turn for the worse with her health, it was not beyond my imagination. The date was October 1st, 2004. I had been evicted and appealed the decision. I just wanted a place to put my belongings. I also was aware of ways in which I could get financial assistance to pay the landlord, Jimmy, what he was due. Back then, everything was not up there, in the cloud. Every written and drawn item from Kelta was priceless to me. Every photograph of her and of Lynn and the life we shared, all these things were on film and on CDs. All I had were memories. I was teetering on the edge of homelessness once again. My search for shelter led me to what was referred to as a boarding house at 721 Holloway Street in Durham, North Carolina. The area had a reputation. It was known as a drug-infested, crime-ridden part of town. Even Eric Peters, my vocational rehabilitation counselor, had reservations about the move. He cautioned against starting a home-based business there, but I had no other options. The boarding house was affordable. We paid weekly, and little to no security deposit was required. That was all I could manage at the time. Living there quickly proved as precarious as its reputation suggested. The building lacked basic security. Doors to the outside were rarely locked, leaving everyone vulnerable. One evening, I made the mistake of allowing a woman into my room. She crossed the line immediately, behaving inappropriately and bending over to expose herself. Snapping to my senses, I asked her to leave. What followed was surreal and frightening. As I walked to the store, she followed, shouting threats and warning me about someone who would come after me if I didn't pay her. Pay her for what? I had nothing to pay for. Discarded needles were on the street in front of the building. I knew it was some form of drug paraphernalia. I have never used illicit substances myself. I had to run for safety when getting off the bus, when I was being harassed on a recent occasion. I was robbed at knife point while living there. I had someone indicate they had a gun in their pocket at night on a different occasion. I had confided in my sister about needing help after being robbed multiple times, but she didn't seem to understand. It would have been difficult to explain to her the concept of not having a car and living in a dangerous city like New Britain, which was closest to our hometown in Connecticut. She had only experienced leaving work and walking to her car. She couldn't comprehend the struggle of living in a high-crime area because it was all I could afford. Like my sister, I never imagined myself living in such conditions, relying on public transportation instead of owning a car. Mentally, I was in unfamiliar territory and completely unprepared for the challenges I faced. Despite all the threats I faced and the repeatedly frightening experiences, I had not been physically assaulted. Yet, not yet. Jimmy, the landlord, wants to know about dissociative identity disorder. There are a few other important facts to know. One is that I had a conversation with Jimmy, the landlord, in which he was asking about my experience treating people with dissociative identity disorder, DID. This used to be called multiple personality disorder, MPD. He, Jimmy, didn't want to know about the incredibly disturbing trauma that people with this disorder experienced or how emotional and traumatic it was for me to help any victim to cope with this because of my capacity for empathy. I just mentioned that people with DID have personalities that have different names. I recalled that as a child, my grandpa called me Brucey. Using that example, I said that if I had DID, which I don't, I might name a child personality or have a child personality named Brucey. I had the opportunity to see Jimmy's wife partially when she was inside his pickup truck. It's important to note that I did not recognize her as the attacker, but I am getting ahead of the story. This detail is very important. The conversation about what DID, pronounced DID, is all about. I would hear about this conversation later. I did meet a friend of the family named Grace. I would join her and her 2 children at Durham Bulls baseball games, and I helped her with her computer. She was a safe and decent person. I once thought Jimmy was decent. She was very attractive, far more so than anyone directly associated with the landlord, which is only relevant to her later encounter with the police. I had been dumpster diving near the library up the street and had acquired many books, which other homeless people appreciated. I had books in piles all over the room. My apartment was just a room in the house. The room is about 18 feet wide by 18 feet from the front door to the back of the room. A wall is set back about 8 or 9 feet from the door to the apartment room. The wall has an opening on the right and the left as you investigate the room from the door. Behind the wall is a mattress on the floor where I slept. There was barely enough room in the apartment today. My computer was set up on a desk against the wall to the right as you entered the room. About 6 to 8 feet from the door, there is a couch. I was waiting for a friend to arrive today. She was a black woman, and the woman I was seeing romantically was also black. Let me describe the apartment building better before I explain what is about to happen. Looking at the house from the street, there is a front door and a driveway to the left. Around the back, there is an apartment. Scott stayed there. He got a discount on rent, just like I was getting free rent for working on Jimmy's website. We paid our rent weekly to Scott, and he gave us a receipt. There is a door on the side of the building that leads inside from the driveway. If you go through that door, you will see the kitchen, which is a common area for cooking meals. Past the kitchen is the bathroom with a shower. An apartment was also down that hallway. Turning right, you would come to the vending machines that Jimmy kept stocked with sodas and snacks. Before you came to my apartment room, there was an apartment on the right and another 2 apartments on the left. Across from my room was the stairway that leads to 4 apartments upstairs. Next to the foot of the stairs was another apartment, It was an all-male boarding house, but females were there offering sex for money. I mentioned an unsuccessful attempt by one woman to get me to accept her service, as I had come to feel like the perfect victim. It's not untrue that people can sense vulnerability. The urban scowl is something a more confident person might use during the day to walk quickly and with purpose if they find themselves in a potentially dangerous part of town. I had sensed danger at night and had run as fast as I could to my home, imagining that getting inside this boarding house at 721 Holloway Street would be safe. However, getting inside was not always safe. In addition to the encounter with the prostitute, I had seen the police use tear gas to get a gun from a resident. My door was open as I expected my new friend to arrive. I learned about a phenomenon called the cocktail party phenomenon years ago. When you hear your name, it can penetrate the cacophony of other sounds. We can hear our name if it is called out, even in a busy and somewhat loud room full of people talking. Something causes us to immediately turn in the direction where we heard it. I noticed this instant attention-grabbing effect years ago after I first learned about it. I was walking to class, deep in thought, when I heard Bruce. Immediately my attention was caught and my head turned in the direction of where someone had called out my name. The person must have been a couple of football fields away. That is what happened next. With my door partially open, I heard the words, "Where's Bruce?" coming from outside my room. Without thinking, I opened my door, stepped into the hallway, and said, "I'm Bruce." A woman stood a few steps up the stairway leading to the second floor. She was not the person I was expecting. She was standing halfway up the stairs, asking Danny, who was just another tenant that lived on the second floor. Other than her being white and not who I was expecting, there was nothing distinctive about her, and I had no idea who she was or why she was looking for me. Time froze for about 1 second, enough for me to register my confusion and to wonder, who is this person that seems to know me? Her eyes locked onto mine and she charged at me, coming down the stairs and around a corner as if propelled by a ferocious determination. I was frozen in shock, unable to react before she burst past me. Entering my apartment, I stumbled after her, walking past her and into the room just as she slammed the door shut and turned the lock, trapping us both inside. Before I could assess the situation, her fist collided with my cheek in a brutal punch that sent me reeling. The blows kept coming one after another in a flurry of violence that sent my glasses flying across the room. I could feel blood beginning to flow down my face as she continued to unleash a relentless assault on my face, leaving me battered and disoriented. I was dazed and shocked. I staggered backward with each blow. There wasn't much room between the door and the couch where I fell. I was shocked by the fact that a woman would lock herself in the room with me, then attack me, someone who I didn't even know, and I was shocked by the blows to the face. She shouted, "Why do you keep calling me?" I answered immediately, "Who are you?" with genuine shock in my voice. I was wondering who the heck was attacking me, and why. I was hurt badly. Blood was pouring out of my nose and across my face, almost immediately. Was she high on drugs? I managed to get to my feet and noticed that there was a distance between us. I used the opportunity to move forward and unlock the door that she had just locked. Then I pulled her toward the door, trying to get her out of the room. At some point, I brought my hand to my face and noticed my hand was smeared with blood. As I pulled her toward the door and outside, I touched the door frame for balance, and I left a blood-smeared thumbprint on the door frame with my right thumb. She didn't have a scratch on her. I had not even hit her at all or defended myself in any way. I had always been nonviolent, peaceful. I had never been attacked at all, much less in such a bloody way. One might ask why I didn't fight back. There was something instinctual in me about not hitting girls or women. I never had to consider a moment like this. At this point, I had no idea that it would be crucial to know that she was not bleeding at all. She was all perpetrator and attacker. I couldn't defend myself if I wanted to do so. I had no idea that none of her blood being anywhere in the room or on the property would be important. In fact, as I was trying to get her outside, I was worried about hurting her. This happened so incredibly fast and could not have taken more than 60 seconds. I wanted to establish safety from this crazy person so I could call 911. As I tried to shut the door, she was pushing the door to get back inside. I couldn't close the door. I couldn't believe it. What more did she want to do to me? I reached my hand to try to push her away. My hand connected with her face, and it might have been partially closed into almost a fist. This was the closest thing to acting in self-defense. It seemed like all I had accomplished was pushing her away from the door so that I could lock it and finally feel safe inside my apartment room. Here I was worrying about hurting her because she was female. Those rules were probably not meant for situations like this. I had not used anywhere near enough force for it to be considered self-defense. Like every victim, I immediately picked up my phone and dialed 911. I then waited for the police, still bleeding profusely. My mind flashed back to what had just happened. The door had been opened partially in case my friend had shown up and didn't know what room I was in. But she was black. My girlfriend sometimes showed up to see me. She was black as well. The person I encountered halfway up the stairs was white. Who was she? Who was this attacker? And why did she do this? Was she high, and had she mistaken me for someone else? Some of the guys who lived in the house had been returning from work. The voices outside must have given me the sense that she had left. Some had witnessed the commotion from outside my apartment room. Unfortunately, they would not have seen what happened after she locked the door. There were several people in the hallway or on the stairs who looked with shock at me. These would be witnesses. Someone advised me to look in the bathroom to see how badly I was bleeding. Another tenant, Joachim, told me to go look in the mirror. He was the friendliest guy I knew at that residence, along with Danny. I was shocked at how profusely I was bleeding across my face. I wondered why I was not bruised, as opposed to seeing my face sliced up like this. I was trying to stop the bleeding. The lacerations were not deep. The cuts were more like the way one gets cut up when shaving. I was not getting nauseous or feeling faint, like after being accidentally cut with a knife in the past or on a glass window, occasions which had made me feel faint. Joachim asked me, "So you don't know her from Adam?" "No, I have no idea who she was," I answered. I registered some comments from the residents. I heard the words, "Why would you let her inside your apartment if you didn't know her?" I was pacing between the bathroom to look at my cuts, the hallway to talk to the tenants, and my room. In the room, I saw my blood on the floor and another place where my hand had smeared blood from my face onto the wall, in addition to my own bloody thumbprint on the doorframe. Obviously, she didn't leave any bloody marks or any evidence to help the police find her. She had done all the violence. She had left without a cut or scratch. Joachim and Danny could see my blood in my apartment room, places where my blood was on the floor, my bloody thumbprint on the door frame. Looking in the mirror down the hallway in the bathroom, I was shocked by the extent to which I was cut. I was still bleeding from cuts on the left and right sides of my face. I had never been assaulted in this manner in my life. I had never known any violence in my life, only threats of violence. Blood was also coming from my nose and mouth. I believe I was in such a state of shock that I was not aware of feeling any pain. I knew that the mind had dissociated from feeling anything at all, physically or emotionally. It was hard to stop the bleeding with so many cuts. I was wearing a dark striped green short-sleeved shirt. It was covered in blood. I was wearing shorts, and those were covered in blood as well. Even my socks and shoes were bloody. Within just a few minutes, my shirt, shorts, socks, and shoes had soaked up blood that had drained off my face.